Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. In today's webinar, we're going to be doing a quick demonstration of the concept of additional parties, the different touch points that these additional parties involve, and the data points that we collect, and how do we use that data across court forms automation as well as for other document automation is pretty much what we're going to be covering in today's webinar. Today's webinar is not accredited for any CPD credits, so I kindly request you to keep a note of that. So no CPD for today, but we're certainly preparing our CPD sessions for the coming months or the coming weeks going forward. Kindly request you to use your phone lines instead of using the computer for your audio, because we found that the quality of the audio has been better. Would join me over the phone. And do use the mute option and utilize the chat option to ask any questions, just for some simple housekeeping. Now, like every other uLaw webinar, today's webinar has a specific agenda. We're going to be talking about the concept of additional parties within the uLapractice platform, the value that the additional parties, along with the court form automation, bring to your business, time concepts in terms of the amount of time saved, the amount of energy of repurposing data that's saved, and how does that allow you to streamline your business, save you the time to apply it to more value-add opportunities within the business. Okay, and part of the webinar we're going to be talking about various examples of the types of court forms, and I'm talking about specifically in the provinces of, in fact, the province of Ontario, where we have automated the court form filling anywhere from 60% in certain complex forms where data there isn't much of data that can be captured within our product, such as formulas and etc., to about even 95% where it's pretty much information that we already know. We also use the concept of additional parties within other forms, such as retained letters, client ID verification, and we're going to talk about how we utilize it for retainer letters. As an example, you could include another individual within a matter as a joint retainer as the type of party, and we'll talk about how that includes the added party as a joint retainer in the document itself. Okay? So when you look at additional parties, the concept that we've utilized in uLapractice is fundamentally when you start to create a file, you of course do it for a client. You would create a contact, that of a client, and you would of course create a matter or a file for that client. Now, depending on the situation, depending on the actual matter itself, the nuances of the matter, you may actually have other parties or other individuals that may be part of that matter. A great example is that of a joint retainer. So if it's a purchase of a real estate condo or maybe a house, and maybe it's a situation where both you and your spouse are actually buying this house, then if the legal professional were to create the wife as the primary contact, create a matter under her name, the additional party in this as a joint retainer would be the spouse, and when the retainer letter or other agreements are put together, it would include both their names in the agreement, as an example. Another great example would be that of court forms in terms of, let's say, a small claims matter, or let's say a landlord and tenant board situation, where you have parties, types of landlord, and another party, the type of tenant. And in the small claims, of course, you have the plaintiff and the defendant. You could have multiple plaintiffs, multiple defendants, of course, multiple tenants. So all these different collaborative stakeholders, if you will, surrounding a core client's file, that's what we include within the additional parties. Okay? You could have attention. So basically, if you want certain correspondences to be sent to a certain individual within a company, for example, if you're dealing with a corporate client and all the correspondences have to be sent to a specific individual or a department, you can actually add the additional party as intention. You have, of course, the applicant as an additional party, child or child representative if it's a family matter, it's a separation, as an example. We spoke about the plaintiff-defendant situation. Now, uLaw also allows you to automate court forms for accident benefits. So certain accident benefit forms or injury forms require you to capture the health practitioner, the name of the insurance company, the name of the police officer who was at the scene, etc. So adding all this information allows us to now provide a more comprehensive fill-out of that particular form itself. Right? Similar to attention, we also have other types like the invoiced to. Again, so you may actually create a file for a specific individual, but you may have to invoice another company. That's another great example of how you would use invoice to. Okay? Pretty much covered all the examples that are on the slide. Let's talk a little bit further about how we utilize them. We're going to be spending a lot of our today's webinar demonstrating these capabilities in the different touch points. Okay. Today we've automated the court forms for the province of Ontario. We're very close to taking this into other jurisdictions. We're working with the court forms that are available across other jurisdictions to automate as well. But today within Ontario, we help automate small claims, landlord and tenant as areas of practices, Highway Traffic Act or POA, family, criminal accident benefits, and even WSIB and tribunals. Okay? Okay. So before I get into any further, this is really setting the context today. A big part of today's webinar was just to introduce you to the concept of additional parties and how they are used across uLaw. And with no further delay, let me switch gears to my uLaw account. As often I use this playground account called Roger Moore. I'm logged in into this legal professional who's using uLaw, Mr. Roger Moore. And where we introduce the concept of additional parties is within the matter itself. Okay? So, assuming that you have already created a client, taken the example, let me quickly search up an example of a client that we've created specifically for demonstrating the capabilities of the forms. I'm going to be using a client, Mr. Jonathan Form. So, of course, a prerequisite is that you create a contact under the client's group by the name Jonathan Form, right? So I can quickly jump into my contacts and kind of showcase to you this contact that we've already created. So let me go ahead and search that contact real quick. I'm just going to type in Form, and there's Mr. Jonathan Form. Okay. If I were to edit his information, there's Mr. Jonathan, Mr. Form. His short name, nickname is JF. Let's just extend that ST to a street, and we'll say it's in Ottawa. Oh, that's great. Let me go ahead and save that information. So typically before you get started, you would enter the client's information. And once you've done that, of course, now you have the opportunity to go ahead and create a matter for them. Of course, if you're starting afresh with the uLaw, this would be a brand new file. For the purposes of today's demonstration, when I click matter, I'm going to be presented with pre-existing files that we've already created for this particular client for demonstration purposes. And as you can see, we have created right from landlord and tenant to small claims about 11 different files that we have for Jonathan Form. Now, under each matter, you have the opportunity to, of course, docket, add retainers, add disbursements. You can go ahead and click a new retainer if you'd like. You can associate rates for other paralegals or legal professionals to be involved in collaborating within this matter, or lawyers to collaborate based on their roles in the firm. Of course, you have documents where you can integrate with third-party tools such as Google Drive, OneDrive through API integration that we do. And you have a specific section if you wanted to enter data into both your trust and general. Can we divide it based on where money is flowing in and coming out of, okay? And now you have this tab right here, and it's the fourth tab in a matter called Additional Parties. So if you look at this example, what we've done is if you do not have any party at all, so let's say this is Emma Brown, I'm just going to go ahead and edit this item. Going to delete this party. Okay. So by default, what you should expect is when you click on additional parties, it would say there are no parties listed. Okay. So there's no associations of contacts or other individuals that we know of that have been related to this matter within uLaw practice. So the first step, once you create a client and create an appropriate file or matter, the next logical step is to start adding the contact information of all the other parties that you believe would be involved within the matter. Okay? And how would you do that? You would use the same contacts menu option, and that's very powerful within uLaw, that it allows you to capture contact information for various different parties that you come across as a legal firm. You could go ahead and say add new contact. Now if you know that information and you know the relationship or the party type, you can even create your own set of groups, right? So, and you can add them to that group. So let me go ahead and search for Emma Brown, because that was the contact that we had previously associated. And if I go into my groups, there's Emma Brown. Okay, so we've already got information about Emma Brown. So typically, you'd go in, you would add this client, or rather this contact, not as a client, but just as a mere contact under any of the pre-existing groups, or you can create your own group. You could say this is a defendant, plaintiff, applicant, tenant, whatever it may be. And again, let me make this as a street, and you save that information. So this is step 2. Step 1 is creating the client and the file. Step 2 is starting to create individual party, other information of contacts that you now start to associate. And step 3 is going back to our client, Mr. Jonathan Form. So if I use my dashboard, I can quickly navigate to either the contact or the actual matter itself. Okay, so let me go back to the contact. I'm going to jump real quick into Mr. Jonathan Form's contact information. And from here, I can jump directly into the file that we're dealing with. Now let me associate Emma as the tenant, assuming that I'm representing the landlord. Okay, so I would say add party. And this is where you're starting to associate first the type of the party. So you're going to say T for tenant, and this is alphabetically arranged. And now you're going to choose the name of the person in your contact database within uLaw and associate them as this tenant in this particular matter. Let me go ahead and type in Emma Brown. So what you see is a list of pre-existing contacts that you have saved previously in the contact database within uLaw. So I would choose Emma Brown, and I would hit save. And as soon as you've done that, as you can see, it's starting to load that information and start the association of that particular contact along with all the information of that contact and associate them as a party of tenant in this matter. Now, once I've done that, let us look at where this information gets reflected and where is really the automation that happens behind the scenes. So let's assume you actually want to do a court form that you want to fill out. Typically what you would do is you would download these court forms from the individual jurisdictional websites. Some forms are types of Word documents. Certain documents are of type PDF. And then you would, of course, start to type in or handwrite the information about your client, their address, all the other information they would ask you in that court form, information about other parties that are involved. And what uLaw has done is it's scanned the entire database of all these jurisdictional websites with the forms, ensures that these forms are up to date. Many times our clients help us by indicating if they know ahead of time that certain forms are going to be changed. Typically we take about a 2 to 3 week SLA to ensure that these forms within uLaw are up to date with the actual jurisdictional court forms. Okay? And let's consider the situation of a landlord and tenant board. And now, of course, you have from L1 to, I'm going to go ahead with tenant application for rent reduction. If there is already a claim number %, you can type that in. And I'm going to simply hit the download button, which is now going to generate a document, a T3 court form, very similar to the form that is expected to be presented with the data in it. Right? So this is really coming out from the Social Justice of Ontario. Now you have, of course, the rental unit covered, the information of that particular unit. You have Jonathan form, the information mentioned there. You have the information of the legal professional involved. And any other information that we know we can capture. If not, you can go ahead and start to enter all the other information possible. Okay? So that's really the association between the data, the association between the additional parties, and the documents that information gets reflected in. Let me take an example of maybe a small claims where Jonathan versus Adam. And now you see there is a situation of multiple plaintiffs and multiple defendants. There's even a situation of a joint retainer. So you can see this is a file where Jonathan has a joint retainer with Mr. Alexander Whitmore. And the attention of any invoices sent to Boris Becker. Right? If I generate, let's say, let me give you an example of a letter. And I'm going to say this is a hourly retainer. And I'll generate the PDF for now. You would notice that this document is now made for Mr. Jonathan Form and Mr. Alexander. And you can see that the spelling is not right. It's W-T-H-I-M-O-R-E. Let's assume that it's actually Whitmore. The cool aspect of this is you can go into your contacts because that's the single source of truth of all the data, and that's what's getting represented across forms as well as documents. change it in one place. So let me go ahead and update that information of that individual contact, Mr. Alexander. Let me go ahead and click Edit. And here, I will say that it was with more and hit Save. Once it has been updated in the uLaw contact database, you can be rest assured that that same information gets carried over across all the forms automatically. Now you saw how that information changed. Let's go back into the particular matter itself. So I will go into Jonathan form. Go into the particular matter involved. Okay. Now you can see to begin with, the information here within the additional parties has been updated. Now it's with more, and if I generate that same retainer letter, the retainer hourly, of course the document would be updated with spelling change handled. Okay. Now let's generate a small claims plaintiff's claim. Let me go into my forms, and this is being a small claims matter. Let me go into my small claims court form, and you can see there's quite a few of these different types of forms. Let me choose a plaintiff's claim, and let's say that this was at the Ottawa courthouse. Just going to type in Ottawa, and we automatically pick up the courthouse. A previously available claim number that was mentioned in the matter itself, and I'm just going to go ahead and download that particular form. Okay. Now the small claims matter has the Word document type, so any forms that you fill out would be type of a Word document. Of course, if you're using a MacBook, then you can either get Office 365 for Mac or Word for Mac. There you go. We start to fill out the information of the courthouse itself. Now you can see Jonathan form as the plaintiff number 1. You've got his information. You've got the representative's information, Mr. Roger Moore, his address information as well. You've also got the defendant's information. So you've got Adam Brown. Let's go back to, so here's Adam Brown, and you've got Adam Brown's legal representative as well. Okay? That's Mr. Stefan Edberg. And if there's any other information that needs to be filled out, you can just type that in. Put in the dollar amount. You can double check on this checkbox. It was checked. Okay. And just say it's 10 points. Comes across handy if you wanted to do some digital checks. Got today's date. Okay. You can also go ahead and generate, if you like, for this particular matter, the additional parties. Because there are other parties involved. Let me go ahead and do that. So you would have the main plaintiff's claim form, and then you would, of course, supplement that with the additional parties form. You can see it's got the Adam Pacman, his information. You've got additional plaintiffs Adam Sandler, print it up. Okay? And that was Adam Sandler was the defendant, and then you got Adam Pacman, who is the plaintiff. So you can start to see and appreciate how different the parties, the concept of additional parties starts to evolve first as a means of associating individuals within a file to begin with, and then start to see how it evolves to provide operational efficiencies by allowing you to automate court forms, which you otherwise have to manually type in or handwrite in, and of course saves you time. And if you're going to be doing multiple court documents in a day or over a period of time, then you can see how all of this adds up to save you more time. If there's, say, a situation of a POA or a HDA, of course there are no parties involved. It's just, depending again on the situation, right? Not every matter requires that these parties be involved. So that's when you can go ahead and, depending on the situation, you could say it's a notice of intention, or maybe it's a red light camera form. They differ based on the form and the actual nature of the matter. It actually has just the information of the client. Has an offense number if you've already provided that. Right? Now let's take another complex scenario, that of let's say the family matter. And let's say this is a separation between Jonathan. You can see the applicant in this case is Jonathan, because there's a respondent. There's Emma Brown, who's the respondent, and she's got her legal representative, Stefan. There's also another respondent, Mr. Hudson Brown, and Hudson has a representative. So basically, Mr. Roger Moore represents both Jonathan and Hudson, whereas Emma Brown is represented by a different legal professional, and you've also got the joint retainer between Jonathan and Emma. Okay. So if I were to go ahead and let's say family, and you can choose between the Ontario Superior and the court branch. I'm going to say 8A, and again go back to the same courthouse. You're going to see how all that information and the additional parties gets associated. The form actually gets generated and presented in a Word document. You can see it has the address, the court file number, has the applicant's name, and the applicant's legal representative. Respondent, the respondent's lawyer. Now in the respondents, you do see there are two different lawyers for the two different respondents, and you can see how they're properly aligned next to each other. So for Emma, you've got Mr. Stefan Edberg. For Hudson Brown, you've got Mr. Roger Moore. Okay. And you also see it fills out the ages. It says the applicant is 42 years from the date of birth, and that was a piece of information that we do capture. As you can see, the date of birth is a field within the contact that we capture to provide you with that piece of information as well. You can see here we do have the birth date. And that's one of the reasons why we do that, because certain forms do ask for the age, and this becomes easier for us to fill out. Okay? So there's quite a bit to the association of additional parties. Another big use case of why you would introduce the concept of additional parties is the same information gets repurposed across conflict screening checks as well. Okay? So if you're dealing with Emma Brown, and if you find that name, and if you search up that information, and if you do a conflict screening, you know that Emma Brown was involved in this particular matter. So that would come up in our conflict screening. That's another very important reason why you want to bring these associations. We also do other types of individual court forms. So for a great example, let me choose the provincial criminal matter or even the municipal criminal matter for DUI. And you can see there's a co-accused and there's a representative who's, in this case, the Municipal Provincial Offences Court. If I go in my forms, if I go into my criminal forms, you can see, of course, we have certain documents, like the responses and the consent and the application form. And then we have a few jurisdictional documents. So some examples of disclosures for both federal and provincial documents. And let me choose a municipal disclosure letter for the purposes of this particular matter. And you can see that this is outlined with all the information. You can always type over this. But it gives you a nice structure to create that disclosure document with pre-filled information that you can always change. Okay, so you've got the defense counsel as Mr. Roger Moore, and this is an actual template that's provided for the purpose of the Municipal Provincial Offences Court. Okay? So we looked at landlord and tenant, a family matter. We've looked at POA, small claims, and maybe as the last example, let's look at a rent eviction. Assuming that you're actually going to be representing Jonathan, who's the landlord here. You've got Emma as the tenant. Jump into landlord and tenant. First option, L1. Let's go ahead and do that. Or this could be the other way around, where you're representing the tenant, then Jonathan is your tenant, who's your client, and then you would actually have landlord as the party and associate Emma Brown as that. You can see how the LATV forms in Ontario are that type of PDF, a special PDF that has pre-templatized filling out of information. You've got Jonathan form, his information, the tenant Emma Brown, and last but not the least, you've got Roger Moore's information as well. There you go. Information about the representative. Okay? What else do I have? Let's say a neck injury in a road collision. Go ahead and now generate an accident benefits form. Let's say application for accident benefits. You've got Jonathan form as the client, all that information, the information of the legal representative. You also got the accident details and health information of the health professional. So if you look at this, you've got the health practitioner as Emma Brown, and that's why you have that information filled out. You can see it's not filled out as street, it's capitalized. You can see the insurance adjuster is a company, Bel Air Insurance, and you have the insurance company information filled out as well. Likewise, you can add the policy holders, the name of a police officer who's involved in this accident. You can continue to add those parties into this matter. Look at the additional parties. Basically say family doctor, police officer, associate that name. Okay? So again, just a quick recap for today's webinar. Of course, it was not a CPD session, so I do thank everyone who joined me for the session just to learn a little bit more about the concept of additional parties and how that evolves with the product. It allows you to save time and money in terms of how you could automate some of these court form filling. The importance of additional parties as it associates various different contacts within the context of this particular file. So it really allows you to associate the relationships, if you will, of these different contacts pertaining to this file. One step further, it allows you to generate a very thorough conflict screening search, because once you've made that association, you know those parties were involved in that matter, right? And overall, it's a great feature and a time saver within the product beyond the core legal accounting, matter management, and business accounting capabilities of the uLaw product. So before we move forward to wrapping up today's webinar and having fun with our weekends, I would highly encourage you to open up your phones and basically go to this website. We like to do this little game, a bit of a gamification of or survey, if you will. And ensure that we're actually participating in the particular menti.com. So let me go ahead and launch that particular menti.com site so that you can go in, and we just ask you to put this code 328938 and go ahead with answering the questions, please. So the first question really comes up is, where do you associate uLaw's contacts within the matter? And you can go ahead and start answering those questions. Okay? All right, so let's move along. So basically, what practice areas do you anticipate using the core forms automation for? And again, feel free to participate and contribute and tell us what you think. Okay, so you've got a fair mixture of LATB, family, small claims as well. And anything that you've learned from today's webinar that was helpful to you. Okay. So thank you for participating for that quick and easy presentation. Again, we look forward to you contributing more in the upcoming webinars. Feel free, don't feel shy. We want you to collaborate further so that we can make these sorts of presentations a little bit more engaging. Once again, I want to thank everyone who joined us for today's additional parties and court form automation webinar. We look forward to seeing you in our next webinar in coming weeks. Thank you very much. Have yourself a great weekend ahead.